Well, friends, welcome. And several of you, like Elijah, appeared when I opened my eyes, and I didn't see you before, so welcome. It is nice to see you. You may notice my voice is a little huskier than usual. When I arrived on Sunday, and the second I stepped off the plane, I got just clobbered by allergies. So welcome back to the Bay Area, Mr. Rick. So let's get started here. I want to just orient you. We are on our second week of Loving-Kindness. So next week we'll be getting honor or respect, which is kavod. We'll spend 2 weeks on that and continue. My plan, I think, is to continue through the summer, but afterwards, if anyone wants to hang out, and let me know if you would be interested in taking a break or think we should consider taking a summer break. I'm open to hearing that, but my current thinking is to just continue to proceed. So as you may, for those of you who were here last time, we were talking about loving kindness and this phenomenon where sometimes we see, when we think someone else needs something, it's actually what we need. We tend to be biased towards seeing our own needs in other people. And sometimes we're not giving them what they need, we're just giving them what we need, or what we think we need, what we think they need. And so we were trying to kind of focus on really seeing the needs of other people. So I'm curious, did any of you try this practice? And maybe you'd like to share something about where you saw the needs of others in the last week. Yeah, Joanne? Were you raising your hand, or were you just moving your hand? No, okay.
No, I wasn't really raising my hand, and I wasn't really, I didn't really succeed in this, except today I went to a funeral of our office manager, where I volunteered a number of hours a week since I retired 3 years ago. Maybe it's 4 years ago now. And I mean, I was glad I went, because the only other person from our synagogue where he works was the rabbi who was overseeing the funeral itself. So, and I had heard that this other person from the board probably wasn't going to make it. So I was very glad that I went, even though I had a kind of an altercation. I mean, it wasn't a big deal, but I was a little boisterous with this guy. But he's basically a very good person, and he would say stuff to me like smile. And so anyway, so I went to this funeral and was glad I went, but I was like almost overwhelmed by how wonderful the funeral was for my friend's father. And he sounded like the most perfect father that anyone, and grandfather that anyone could wish. Like just so much love and compassion and energy and thoughtfulness and positivity. And a lot of times when I go to a funeral like that, I'm very jealous, because my family of origin was, not like that. But anyway, so that's all I have to say about this, I guess. That this person was really a paragon of loving kindness.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Joanne, and may his memory always be for a blessing.
Amen.
I know I you know, when I was visiting my father and stepmother last week, and they're really, you know, getting up there, and their health is not nearly as good as it had been. And I had to think, you know, about what they needed versus what I needed, you know, and if I'm making a suggestion, was it for me to be less kind of worried, or was it really something which was in their interest? And I really tried to, you know, the way I approached that was just to sort of talk about what, you know, I was feeling and how I was reacting, and not to sort of tell them that they needed to do A, B, or C. And I will also say that I found that the toaster was broken, and so without any discussion, I just ordered them a new toaster, and they were very pleased about that. So anyone else have a loving kindness story, or a noticing about what other people might have needed that they'd like to share?
Well, I talked about this last time, so go ahead. About the young woman that got in touch with me, who was suicidal.
Mhm.
And I tried to think, what can I do for her? Because, you know, she's in Bellingham, Washington. I'm down here. I can't really do very much. So I thought, what might help her? And so I just made a habit of texting her every day and saying, I love you. I'm here.
Mhm.
And she actually did get in touch with me and say, you know, I think it was, she says, I don't want to scare you, but it was talking to you that night that kept me from killing myself.
Mhm.
And I'm going, oh my God.
Oh boy.
I said, that doesn't scare me. What scares me is you were thinking of killing yourself.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
Yeah. But it is kind of a heavy lift, I have to say. I've never had that happen before.
Yeah, it is very heavy, and I'm glad that you could be there for her.
But she's better, so.
Good.
Yeah.
Janet?
Can I say something about Carol? Is that okay? Is that all?
Sure.
You know, everybody's been sending me texts, prayers and thoughts, and I could paper the walls with them because my brother is seriously ill and in a nursing home. Carol sent me a heartfelt letter, and she also included a letter for me to give to my brother. And that was really nice because it came from her. It wasn't cliches, and it was really sweet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh.
Well, I heard what you said, Janet, about, you know, getting all these emails and feeling like you had to answer them and stuff. And I thought, yeah, duh. I mean, it just seemed a little bit obvious.
Yeah.
So I'm glad it, you
The
know.
point is that you didn't use the cliches.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't like cliches anyway, so.
Well, thank you for sharing that and for uplifting
Thank you. That's very
Carol's
lovely.
menschiness in that way. And I think, you know, finding ways to be authentic and making a heartfelt connection to people is really what loving kindness and what chesed is all about. All right, so let's go a little bit deeper into our second week. That's kind of where we started. So I want to share with you every once in a while we look at some of these key concepts that were identified in the Tikkun Middot Curriculum. And so may I have a volunteer, maybe someone we haven't heard from yet, to unmute themselves and to read this paragraph. And reading it out loud would be probably preferred.
I'll read it.
Thanks, Joe.
Tikkun Middot is intimately connected to Tikkun Olam. Much of the suffering, injustice, and overall dysfunction in human societies is a result of Middot being out of balance. while one individual being out of balance may not have much of an impact, an imbalance multiplied by millions of times across a population will lead to policies and social structures that do not reflect the holiness and dignity of human life. Injustice is only effectively addressed by dealing with both structural and internal midot levels of imbalance.
Thank you, Joanne. So there's a couple of concepts in here, and so what is he talking about with midot or soul traits being out of that balance and dysfunction? You know, he's sort of talking about this on the macro level. Mostly we're talking about this on the micro level. But what is sort of the impact of a soul trait being out of balance? You know, we strive to balance them, but why do we do that? What happens when they're not in balance?
I think when people lack humility and they're arrogant, they're self-centered, and those are the people who seek to, I was just reading this in the newsletter again, you know.
Well, maybe to just sort of on the more personal level, just what happens to us without, I know this is sort of talking about societal, but just like, I certainly could share about what happens with me, but you know, Janet, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, I have found that with my brother being ill and my visiting him every single day, that I've had to say to others, really help others. I have to keep that loving kindness under control. If I try to do too much, I will not be able to do much of anything. Does that make sense? I can't be there for everybody.
Yeah. So in this case, if you were not balanced in your loving kindness, you would end up just way too depleted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And Carol.
I think when we're out of balance, and I think you can extrapolate this to societies as well, there's a potential for causing harm, sometimes very serious harm. So you want to keep yourself balanced so that, and the harm might be to yourself as well as to other people. So just potential for harm.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, I was, you know, the first thing that came to my head is when, you know, I'm out of balance for something, my risk of stepping in the doo-doo goes way up. You know, or I get angry, I get frustrated, I get rushed or hurried, I'm not thoughtful, and you know, all of these sort of things, like which he sort of calls like the dysfunctions. You know, it's like, you know, sort of show up in an argument with my wife, show up in, you know, lack of noticing that one of my classmates needs some help with something. So and then what he's talking about is, you know, just if more our society, if we're all out of, you know, balance, it can really hurt our ability. I mean, Tikkun Olam, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's the idea of repairing the world. So Tikkun Middot is kind of repairing the self. Tikkun Olam is repairing the world. And I think the overall point is if we don't take care of do our own work, if we don't sort of work on improving and uplifting ourselves, then our ability to kind of have a positive impact in the world is really going to be limited. Does that make sense? Yeah, so with that background, let's see where that takes us. Okay, so maybe I'll call on someone. Harry, would you mind reading this one?
Just as too much boundaries can lead to rigidity, when unmodified by boundaries, chesed, loving kindness, can leave one feeling used and depleted, and the recipients of such chesed feeling smothered or unseen. We all probably know of people who practice unbalanced chesed. Perhaps we've experienced it ourselves. This is why we refer to God in the standing silent prayer, the Amida, as Gomel Chesed Tovim, one who bestows good loving kindness. It is possible to have bad chesed.
Mhm.
Right, okay, thank you. So David Jaffe, speaking in the name of Alan Moranis, he brings up this idea of bad chesed. So what is he talking about there? Yeah, Janet?
I do know that people who have disabilities sometimes get annoyed when people try to help them.
Hmm.
Because they pride themselves on their independence.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, so maybe it's offering help where it's not welcome. And he was sort of talking about, example of sort of someone who's maybe just a little bit too smothering. A friend of mine loves to tell this example. We all have teen kids and kids about the same age. And she said one of the other parents from her kid's school said at one point, boy, I don't know what my son's going to do when he goes to college, and I'm not going to be there to plan his schedule for him every day. And she said, yeah, that's a very good question. What is he going to do if you're not there to plan his schedule every day? And for me, that's an example of, perhaps too much loving kindness, where it's not allowing the other person to kind of grow or to be themselves.
Maybe this is a Jewish thing, but have you ever been in a situation where people put food on your plate after you said you didn't want any more?
My mother.
You're too thin. No, my mother didn't need to do that.
Now, my father used to tell stories about my great grandmother, and she'd say, how many potatoes do you want? 2 or 3. And he would say 2. And then she would put 3 on his plate. Say, well, what happened? I said 2. And she'd say, I forgot. So,
My mother would say, dude, you're too fat. You need to lose weight. Here, have some more cookies. And that's not an exaggeration. It really, bless her heart. She had a very odd relationship with food.
hmm,
I was thinking also bad chesed would be when one depletes oneself. And one's always, you're trying to give to kind of what Janet was talking about, giving to everybody so that you really don't have anything for anybody. Especially, and not for yourself either.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, needing to sort of maintain ourselves. And I think that, I paired this with that prior teaching as well, for it's part of this idea that it really is about, finding the balance. If our chesed is out of balance, either from not taking care of ourselves or for trying to do too much for other people, it can inhibit their growth. And it can be stifling to the relationship too, like an example of someone has a disability and you're trying to kind of do everything for them. You're also not, as we talked about last week, not figuring out what they need. It's just what I need. I need to feel like I'm doing something for this person instead of actually getting to know this person and forming a relationship with them. All right, so if we continue to explore, our next step is, all right, I'm going to skip that one. So this is a teaching from Maimonides, and it's talking about escorting guests. So may I have a volunteer to read this, or maybe I'll voluntold somebody. Krina, would you like to read?
Yeah, sure. It's from Maimonides on the Mishnah Torah in 14:1. It says, "It is a positive commandment to visit the sick, comfort mourners, escort the dead, take care of a bride's needs, accompany a guest, and be involved in all the needs for burial. These are gemilut chasadim that one does with one's body, and they have no fixed measure."
Okay, thank you. Let me pause you there. So, and to the whole group, so what is he talking about here? What are these gemilut chasadim? Those are kind of acts of loving kindness. So, what are these acts? What do you notice about them?
Well, they take personal involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, it doesn't mention, writing a check for charity here. It was actually what we were talking about last time. These are the one that I skipped that maybe we'll go back to, but these are really becoming personally involved. Great, thank you. Karina, can you continue, please?
14:2 goes on to say, "The reward for escorting guests is greater than them all. This is the practice that was established by Abraham, who behaved with chesed, feeding and giving drink to travelers and accompanying them on their way. According to our sages, anyone who does not escort his guests, it is as if he has shed blood."
Great, thank you, Karina. So there's a story in the Torah where Abraham, right after he circumcised himself, some strangers showed up at his camp, and he runs around and saying, slaughter a lamb to feed them, and Sarah, you break some bread, and he really, went out of his way to show great hospitality. But there's this idea about escorting guests, what is, and why in the world would that be a greater reward than for comforting a mourner or visiting the sick?
I might be a mile off, but escorting to me seems to go not just seeing to their comfort, but also to their safety, ensuring safety of your guests.
Great, thank you, Carol. Love that idea. Yeah, what else? Yeah, Karina.
My thought is that it's like going above and beyond the requirement. If you have a guest in your home and you give them food and water and such, like Abraham, and then you walk them out to their car, you do that extra thing instead of just standing at the door and say, okay, bye, see ya,
Yeah.
Yes.
A little bit extra.
Yeah, thank you. Alan Moranis told a story where he was going to Israel and had an appointment at one of the universities to meet with one of the big well-known Mussar scholars. And so he got out of his taxi, and there was an older gentleman standing there, and he said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where to find, Rabbi so-and-so's office?" And he said, "Oh, I'm Rabbi so-and-so." And so, and Alan said, "Oh, well, I should have known as a real deep practitioner of Mussar that he would be out here waiting for me." So why might Alan have said that? What does that mean? What is that lesson there? What is the lesson there for us?
I think it's like anticipating what someone else might need.
Yeah, anticipating what someone's needs, and I think there's maybe a certain context about that.
I'm reminded of the times I've been in another country and I needed to go from A to B, and I was actually physically escorted there by somebody I'd never met before. And I would like to think that I would do the same thing in this country. I'm more likely to show them on a map and give directions than to actually physically walk them half, you know. But
What was the impact on you that someone did that?
yeah, I was quite pleased. It made me think very favorably. And by the way, if you go into Trader Joe's, you will be escorted to exactly where you need something. They won't do that at Safeway.
That's,
Yeah, that's true. They do that at Whole Foods too, and it really makes a big difference. It's like, you know, I can't find this one weird, obscure thing. So saying it's in aisle 3, you know, doesn't help me nearly as much as saying it's right there on the middle shelf, squeezed between these 2 other things. Huge, huge difference. Huge impact.
Or actually come with me. It's right, you know, I will show you.
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
yes.
They do. Yeah. It's great.
Interesting. I've done that with people occasionally when I was riding up at the farm all the time and somebody would say, I'm looking for so-and-so's stall. Oh, well, I'll take you to her. Just trying to explain isn't that easy. It's just easier. I mean, you can explain, but the person might get, it's a big place. So, you know, I'll take you over to her barn. Yeah.
So why might Maimonides have said that not escorting someone is like shedding blood? It's like, great, you escort somebody, that's fantastic. But here he's saying if you don't escort someone, it's like shedding blood. What's going on with that? Yeah, Karina.
Is that tying in maybe with what was said earlier about the safety issue?
Yeah.
You don't escort them, you know, through whatever it is, you know, they might, I don't know, be attacked, or they might stumble and fall, or, you know, some kind of accident may befall them.
Yeah, great point.
I think also there's also something about, just looking to see if I was muted. Like if you embarrass somebody and they turn red, like that's like shedding blood, I've heard. And maybe if you don't, you know, like, oh, okay, nice seeing you, bye. You know, maybe that first person feels a little put down or embarrassed that you didn't extend yourself further. And that's like shedding.
Yeah, well, that's a great point, John, and it makes me, like when Carol first brought this up, it's like, how do you define safety? Right? Like, yeah, maybe literally somebody could get mugged and stabbed or shot or something, but Joanne's pointing out maybe they could get embarrassed, or, you know, and that's, you know, a terrible experience when we feel embarrassed or we feel helpless. Yeah, Carol.
It's not exactly escorting, but I know that when I go somewhere with somebody, especially at night, and particularly if it's another woman, my age demographic or something, but really anybody, if I drop somebody off at their home, I don't leave until that person's inside the door.
Right.
I know that a lot of my, you know, my friends have done that with me as well. And to me, that's just, it's what you do. To me, it's not anything wonderful. It's what you should do. You make the person safe. And I'm kind of thinking that's a kind of an escort.
Yes.
Or you might even walk them to their door, depending, you know, like if it's a very elderly person or something.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol. Paul, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I'm thinking back on some of the earlier slides that you had shown about, I mean, it's interesting to talk about this but it does seem to me that you could take this you know, too far, right? That I could say to my elderly mother who's 91 years old, no, Mom, I'm really going to take care of you, and she's still very independent, living by herself and you know, in her own home. So honoring that she says, no, I'm fine, as opposed to thank you very much. You know, there are going to be times when she's going to be very grateful that I'm there to help her with something, and other times when she's going to say, no, I can do this. And so you know, it's a little bit like escorting my mother, you know, or escorting a guest. It's important to, I think, in my experience, it's important for me to acknowledge that I need to honor what I'm hearing back from the other person.
Yeah, well, thank you, Paul. Wonderful tie-in. Absolutely. And that ties into what we talked about 2 weeks ago. It's like, I think I know better what, I can say, I know better what you need, Mom. So I'm going to do A, B, and C. It's like, well, no, actually, you don't know better. So, or even if you do, it's disrespectful to, they get to choose for themselves. Okay, so this is, I believe what's next. This is going to be a lead. All of this is a lead into our breakout discussion. So in the materials for the week, Rabbi David Jaffe, he shared the story of Rabbi Moshe Rosenstein, who was a student at the Kelm Yeshiva. Now, the Kelm Yeshiva was one of the big Mussar yeshivas in Lithuania. During the 19th century, Lithuania was the center of the Mussar movement, which was started by Rabbi Israel Salantos. This is like a very famous Mussar yeshiva. So he said that when he arrived, each person greeted him so warmly, he thought he must have met them. And, oh, so glad you're here. You must be tired. Let me get you something to drink. Let me get you something to eat. And then someone else did the same thing. And so he said this is how he learned to fulfill the mitzvah of greeting all people with a warm smile. So here we've taken this idea even further. What started out as, maybe people who are in our lives or trying to find that right amount of helping them or escorting them. Here like Abraham, we're talking about strangers, greeting them with a warm smile, escorting them. So when we go into our breakout groups, what I'd like you to talk about is, maybe what holds you back from greeting strangers warmly? And what might you do to kind of increase the warmth of your greetings? Or what holds you back from, escorting someone, in that way. Okay, so I'm going to stop the share. And I'm going to open the breakout rooms. Okay, so here we go. Let's see, just a peek. Okay. So you should see a note on the screen. Please join the breakout room. And there we have it. Okay, for those of you who are watching on the streaming services, this is going to end our streaming for this week. Thank you so much for being here. I want to invite you to come join us in the Zoom room. You can go to the American Mussar website, and you can see, you can join my email list and come and join us in the Zoom room next time. So thank you so much for being here.
What are you talking about?
Olam Chesed Yibaneh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that is a great one. As someone once pointed out in one of my Mussar groups, it's very easy in the room or in our virtual room to say, oh yeah, I'm going to greet everybody. I'm going to be a good host. I'm going to act perfectly in all situations. And, the reality is that, nobody can do that. And I think one of the real paths to growth is understanding what holds us back. It's like when the rubber hits the road, what holds us back? So I would love to hear kind of what your discussions were like, and maybe, yeah, Shelley. So you need to unmute.
Sorry about that. I'm going to say I think what holds us back is judgment. We think if we're stepping into somebody's field and being hello and happy or whatever, that what if I'm looking like a fool? And so we're really judging ourselves, but we're assuming that the other person is going to judge us as well. So I am that person though that walks around always with a smile and talking to strangers and always uplifting. because it uplifts me as well.
Hmm.
And you know, that smile I get in return, or even if it's not a smile, you know, recognizing that my smile to that somebody who's having, you know, a bad day maybe gives them a moment of pause and
Hmm.
gives them, their heart a bit of a break. So yeah, that's what I would say. It's more to do with judgment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other thoughts, Carol? Yeah, what holds you back?
Well, I am by nature, have always been extremely shy. You wouldn't know it here. I talk a lot, but being shy isn't a behavior, it's a feeling.
Hmm.
And what I feel is I walk around, I smile a lot at people, I really do. But sometimes I'm a little too much in my own head and I just don't even notice there's anybody there. However, more important than that, in certain situations, if I smile, is this person or these people going to assume something about where my boundaries are or aren't? Are they going to presume they can enter my boundaries? And my boundaries with strangers are fairly far out here.
Hmm.
I'm careful.
Mhm.
So I think there's a little fear factor. Now, if I'm walking around the neighborhood and, you know, in the park, stuff like that, no, I'll smile at everybody. But let's say I was on the city streets of San Francisco
Mm.
and there's a big group of people. Maybe I won't be so quick to smile
Mhm.
because I want to keep that distance.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, Shelley was talking about, you know, she didn't use words, there's sort of fears of judgment, but there's also, you know, we have a right to set our own boundaries. And, you know, there might be a concern about someone, you know, because then I think what you're talking about is vulnerability, right? It kind of makes us, both of you are sort of, it makes us a little bit vulnerable to do that, you know? Yeah, because we don't know how people are going to react, whether they're going to judge us or whether they're not going to judge us and they're going to be like, oh, smiling, does that mean we're going to start hugging? You know, I'm being facetious, but you just don't know, like how people, you know. So yeah, that could be a concern. What other thoughts? Yeah.
Well, Janet and I were talking about, you know, greeting strangers and how you know, sometimes they don't hear you or you don't get a response and then you feel kind of silly but I think sometimes they didn't hear me maybe, you know. So I'll try saying it again, like in a higher pitch, because I have a low voice and maybe good morning, how are you doing? You know, like more like that, you know. And, you know, it's funny. I mean, like in the parking lot of my building, some people will say hello, some won't. And I start feeling angry if I said hello and they didn't even respond, especially if I said it more than once.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah. So there's, you know, maybe a fear of rejection that could come up as well.
That's a big thing with me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Very, very human.
I was just thinking, yeah, about how I find there's a cultural component to this as well. I grew up in Southern California. It was in California till I was about 25 or 30, I guess. And then I moved out to the East Coast. And it was a bit of a cultural shock because I had grown up in California where people were generally very pleasant with each other and getting a smile out of somebody was very easy. That was my experience growing up. And coming out to the East Coast, I spent time in New York and was warned by people, you know, close to me that you had to be very firm when you're going out on the streets and make sure that they knew that you were not somebody to be fooled with. So I had to kind of build up this new exterior, which I was not accustomed to. And yet I did find that the people did have more of a gruff exterior, but once you got beyond that, then I learned that they were very warm people. So I had to learn that, yes, it's important to have that initial, just to sort of acknowledge that there are these boundaries, but then be okay with allowing them in. And now when I go back to California to see my mom, I'm always really amazed at like how easy people smile to at each other, just in the checkout line, just people being very, very, very friendly a lot. And it's a lot of it's cultural. I'm just experiencing. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great, I mean, I grew up in New York and moved to California, so I may have mentioned this, like the opposite. I grew up in Syracuse and like going down to New York City when I was a kid, and very young in the 70s or later in the 80s, I was like, don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact with anybody. And there was this really funny skit on Saturday Night Live where Joe Mantegna was the mayor of New York, and people were calling in and saying, I was out and somebody mugged me. And he's like, well, what were you doing on that street at 2 a.m? And well, I didn't do anything. And, someone, shoved this sharpened screwdriver between my ribs. He's like, well, that will happen in New York sometimes, but it was very funny. But there was very much this, don't make eye contact, don't. And you had to like really, so clearly, someone who wanted to, but then again, my, one of my cousins lived, on the edge of Harlem, and she walked around and talked to everybody, and, didn't, nobody ever messed with her. So it wasn't the only way you could show up, I think, but that was clearly sort of what the expectation was in New York City.
A lot of cultural stuff then. And now that I think of it, when I was in Ireland, everybody talked to you. Very friendly. Yeah. Especially if you were obviously an American and they comment on the terrible weather. Sorry about the terrible weather we're having.
All right, well, this is a good segue, I think, because then it's like, well, when we're talking about some of these things that might hold us back, let's talk about our practice for the coming week. So, our mantra, we're gonna shift, and the new mantra is to greet each person, with a warm smile. And let me just say, like, what might that, before we get into the practice, if we're chanting that, greeting each person with a warm smile, what might that reminder at the beginning of the day do for you?
It might change your mood or perspective.
Yeah. Can you say more about that?
Well, I'm just thinking, if, okay, I'm going to greet at least three people with a warm smile today. And so I want to put forward some positive energy. And if I start off in a funk of some kind, I guess I need to get an attitude adjustment somehow.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I think what you're sort of implying is like the warm smile isn't always a warm smile. Like a warm smile is great, but it's about having a certain positive energy, about, we have these, there's sort of, we're not talking the fake smile, we're talking about, and maybe by chanting this mantra or focusing on it, we can actually start to build up some of that positive energy. Okay, and Joanne was, is a fast reader, so she read ahead, which then leads us to the practice.
Oh, sorry.
Which is to really try to give some warm attention and a smile to at least 3 different people. And with this, try to notice the people who you are giving your attention to. Now, this is really interesting. What Rabbi Jaffe wrote is the goal is not simply to smile, but to notice what it's like to do this. Because when I was taking my very first Mussar class, there was a practice for the Sultrate of Honor, which was to praise 3 people a day. And I found I couldn't do it. I mean, I literally could not praise 3 people a day. And it's like, So I was like, wow, that is telling me something about my balance and sort of an area for growth. And, you know, by sort of doing these practices, we might find that it pushes up against our comfort zone. You know, yeah, Carol is talking about this, you know, might help us kind of grow courage, or it could impact a number of different soul traits, or impact us in a number of different ways. So I look forward to hearing next week. If I'm warning you, I will ask a little bit. Now, no shame if you don't get to this, don't do, that's okay, but you're just invited, and you know, you'll have an opportunity to kind of share some of maybe what came up for you when you tried the practice. All right, so let's close our session today as we began with a short meditation. So again, please close your eyes. Once again, take a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. I want you in your mind's eye to visualize the other people who are on Zoom with us today. Imagine their faces and see yourself greeting them with a warm smile. Having that pleasant countenance. And now imagine running into someone who you see regularly. Maybe it's someone in your household. Maybe it's someone at a store. Maybe it's someone who you speak to regularly on the phone. That warm smile will be conveyed with your words and your energy. And visualize yourself giving that warmth. Now think about maybe an acquaintance you know less well, or even into someone who you're just seeing or meeting for the first time. Can you give them some openness and some warmth? Inviting them into a place of safety. Making an opening bid for that kind of escorting relationship through your initial warmth and greeting. See yourself doing this. Now let those images fade. And open your jaw and smile. And we'll just spend a moment of gratitude for this hour spent together in community. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, thank you so much for being here with us this week. I wish you a week of warmth and loving kindness for you and those in your life.